15 men who went on horrendous dates and lived to tell the tale. Unfortunately, men had many tales up their sleeves and revealed some pretty horrendous experiences. Like, dating is truly an extreme sport, so here are some of the worst dates that have most likely scarred men for life. 1. First, she didn't feel like going out, then she insisted on going out because she had a bad day and you're fun. She picked me up, and as we ate dinner shortly after, she confessed her bad day was because she asked out a coworker and he rejected her and told everyone else, so she has to quit now. I asked for the check immediately. I actually gave the waiter my card first to move it along faster. He saw it on my face and obliged. She was dropping me off at my place. She started ranting about how I probably hated her, told me to call her a bitch. I didn't, then looked at me laughing and said, "You think I'm gonna do something crazy?" and took her hands off the wheel. At that moment, the light up ahead turned red. I jumped out, slammed the door, and walked home. 2. I went on a blind date with a coworker's daughter. Horrible idea, you should never do this. She wanted to go to a specific restaurant that was known to be a little shady. I picked her up and immediately knew this was a terrible idea. She just came off really entitled and rude. We got to the restaurant, sat down, and ordered drinks. I had a beer and she got a cocktail and almost immediately started flirting with an older man who was clearly intoxicated. She convinced him to buy us a round of drinks and then completely ignored him. I was shocked, but we continued the date. I stopped drinking because I needed to drive, but she continued and got a couple of more drinks before we finally left. As I was driving her home, I asked why she wanted to go to that restaurant specifically. Well, it turned out she was barely 19 and they don't card her there. Apparently, this is in the US. I was 22 at the time and was under the impression that we were the same age. There was no second date, but I was able to save face with my coworker and learned a valuable lesson. 3. I went on a double date with my friend, his fiancée, and his fiancée's maid of honor. I was the best man, so they wanted us to get to know each other. She had absolutely zero interest in anything I said. She didn't want to talk to me about anything and wouldn't even glance in my direction the whole night. So things were a little awkward. The wedding day came and we had to walk down the aisle together, which was awkward. The bridesmaids and the groomsmen wanted to dance side by side, one couple at a time, when introduced at the reception. She didn't even dance down through the reception hall to the table. I looked like an idiot dancing into the reception while she just casually strolled with an annoyed look. Then she left the reception an hour later to go home. She was a lot of fun. 4. I talked with a girl on Tinder and we decided to meet up at a restaurant. When I arrived there, I saw her holding hands with a guy. She let go of his hand as I sat down and introduced me to her cousin. I left the table immediately, and as I headed for the door, the dude got up and told me, "You invited me here, now you have to pay for my meal." He was at least half a foot taller than me and 80 pounds heavier. I said sorry and pretended to walk back to the table. As he turned away, I ran the hell out of there as fast as I could and never looked back. I haven't used Tinder since then, and I never will. 5. She hit me in the head with a metal bottle that was in her purse after I refused to continue the date. She showed up as a completely different person. The photos we exchanged pre-date were so real. It turned out she had a friend who was trying to help her get a boyfriend, so whenever I wanted a pic or something, she would ask her friend to do one and she would, then she'd send it to me. This was in the Plenty of Fish era. 6. I was 19 and in the military. I matched with an 18-year-old online and we planned a date. I didn't have a car, but she was cool with picking me up and heading to dinner. For starters, she looks way different from her online photos. On the way, she tries to take me somewhere else to show me where she likes to smoke pot. I have to tell her multiple times I'm in the military and could get in serious trouble for pot, and I'd rather not be around it. She relents and we go to dinner at Applebee's. While there, she makes fun of my tattoos and hobbies, so overall, it's not a good date so far. Then she starts getting calls. She ignores the first couple and then answers. It turns out that while she was, in fact, 18, she was still in high school and was skipping marching band rehearsal. We finished eating, she paid, even though I offered to, and I tried to politely tell her I had to get back to my base. She starts to drive that way, but then veers off course, takes me down some back road and pulls over, saying something about being spontaneous. I then very sternly tell her to take me back to my base. It was a very awkward and quiet drive back. We didn't say anything when I got out of the car, and we didn't talk again after that. 7. A woman pulled out some research she'd done on me. She asked me why I had co-signed for a house with my sister. When I asked her why and how she had this information, she responded, "It's public information if you pay a fee." There wasn't another date after that. 8. I showed up to the date and the first question she asked was, "Oh, how did you get here?" Me, I rode my bike. I hate some. Whenever I see them, I want to run them over in my car. 2 minutes later, she asked, "So where are you from?" "I grew up in Canada. I've been to Montreal." "Oh, cool, me too. I really like it. What do you think?" "I hated it. I thought it was dirty and the French people were really rude." I started talking about work and said I was in consulting. She responded with, "Me too. I hated it. I didn't like a single consultant I met." We left after 30 minutes and never talked to each other again. 9. She arrived stoned an hour late to the bar and decided to get her nails done 5 minutes before the date. She talked about her life and problems without pause for the entire hour we were out. She was a daddy's girl with an internship at his company. Her bills were paid by her father, and she had no real problems beyond not getting enough spending money from her dad to buy her a Cartier bracelet. I decided not to text her after the date. 3 days later, she texted me saying I was a sexist piece of shit for not continuing the conversation. 10. I met this girl on Tinder, was very chatty and flirty online, and arranged to meet for drinks and a meal. We met up and she arrived 30 minutes late. The chatty and flirty person I'd been talking to just wasn't there at all. She had short, curt answers and was constantly on her phone. I felt like I was doing all the heavy lifting with the conversation. We sat at our table and we were about to order, and she leaned over and said, "Oh, you got this right. I'm not averse to paying for a first date, but to have it put so bluntly pissed me off, considering how poor the conversation was." She proceeded to order the most expensive items on the menu and a large cocktail for herself, all the while I was trying to make conversation and get to know her. When she was on her phone, I peered over and saw what she was doing. She was on Tinder right in front of me, messaging other guys while on our first date. I saw red. I refused to be treated like that by anyone. I excused myself to go to the bathroom and surreptitiously whipped my jacket off the back of my chair while going. I went to our waiter and explained what had happened, and he was like, "Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that." I paid for my drink and tipped him for being so helpful. I canceled my order but told him to keep her order in place. He smiled and said, "I know what you're doing. Good luck to you." Then I left. 15 minutes later, my phone was getting message after message from her asking where the hell I was, that she hadn't her purse on her, etc. I blocked her, went off to a pub and called a mate to meet me to rescue the night with beer and laughing over the situation. One of the worst but definitely memorable dates. 11. I was around 15 years old. We had broken up before, but we were trying to get something going again, or at least I thought so. We were hanging out in a park and she brought her friend. She suddenly left me alone with her friend, who said, "She doesn't even like you, you know." Then the friend texted me while I was in front of her, "But I like you." Her friend wasn't my type, so I told her it wouldn't happen. Then my ex returned and was like, "So did you succeed?" Her friend started crying. What a shitty day that was. I love being 15. Glad I don't have to deal with that crap anymore. 12. I was asked out to a concert with a girl who had an extra ticket. We met 2 hours before the concert. She was talking about how the singer used to send her dick pics. She also admitted that she was banned from the band's concerts for a while due to stalking them. I wanted to give the band at least a chance, but it was awful. That was our first and only date. 13. I have 2 bad date stories. There was the gal I planned to take on a picnic lunch, but instead of riding up to the parkway, she kept asking if we could just ride back and forth on the same road in town. She wasn't interested in me, she just wanted to ride past her ex's house so he could see her on the back of a motorcycle with another guy. The other bad date was with a gal who brought a toddler. I thought it was a date, considering we met on a dating site, but she seemed to be only interested in interviewing me as a babysitter. Like, she had zero interest in anything besides finding someone to watch her kid. 14. I dated this woman after getting out of a serious relationship. I took her to a jazz club because I thought it'd be sophisticated. It was louder than a schoolyard. The few times I could get in conversation, I talked about my ex. 10 years later, we're married but not to each other. Sorry for the awful date, ex. 15. And finally, I was catfished before the term was invented. We called it MySpace angled. It was my literal first ever date. I met this girl on MySpace who lived 30 minutes from me and was going to go to the same tiny college I was going to in the fall. We clicked and decided to meet. I showed up at her place with flowers and was nicely dressed. I was met by her parents and sibling at the door. The father was in the military and grilling me. I was nervous and felt awkward. After 10 minutes, she finally came downstairs. She is dressed like she is going to prom and is the same woman in the pics, just about 100 pounds heavier. She gave me a quick hug and gave me a printed picture of her. Besides being MySpace angled and feeling obliged to take her out, she proceeded to tell me how our future lives were going to go. We would be the couple on campus and then we'd marry after graduation. Again, this was my first date. Thankfully, dinner ends quickly, but she said, "Oh, it's still early, didn't you say we should see a movie?" Having never been on a date before, my reaction was, "Yes, let's see this new horror movie." She said she wasn't a huge horror fan, so this will sink the date. I asked her and she said it was a great idea. When I got home, she texted and called nonstop, wanting to know if I had made it home okay. I said I had and I was going to bed. The next day, I started to try to fade out. She didn't like that, and I blatantly said, "I'm sorry, I didn't feel the spark. Besides, I think it would be best if we both attend college single." She cried and demanded a few more dates. I declined. Fast forward a few weeks, and we have pre-freshman orientation in the summer. I met a woman who was 100% more my type there, and we clicked. We did long distance. Around this time, the catfish started calling and bugging me. She said she heard I was dating someone else. She wouldn't stop calling, texting, and messaging me on AIM and MySpace. I had to block her. College started, and she, of course, lived in my dorm, so did the girl I was long-distance dating. We eventually broke up, and after we did, my catfish would run into me on campus. She created new AIM accounts all the time and messaged me about how she was dying of cancer, and her last wish was to sleep with me. Eventually, she faded away, stopped bugging me, and left that college at the end of the semester.